If you've been watching me for any amount of time, you know I'm a big Rob Zombie fan. In the last couple years, with Rob not making any new movies, there's been this hole, this void in my life. Today I wanted to ask the question, what's going on and what's next for Rob Zombie? Hey, what's up everybody? Nick here, and today I want to talk to you guys about Rob Zombie, everybody's favorite piñata in the horror filmmaking world. Look, Rob Zombie is a guy that stands out for a lot of reasons, from his physical appearance, to his movies, to his music. Rob Zombie is a very eccentric, very different, out there guy. He is kind of the definition of the word heavy metal, so it just kind of works that he also makes that music. Rob Zombie's never been somebody that really cares about how he's perceived by the public. He doesn't do things for you, he does them for himself. And I really dig that about Rob Zombie. He is very authentic, very much himself, from his movies to his music to the way he presents himself. Rob Zombie's had a career that has had very high highs and super low lows, and that's just with his filmmaking. So obviously in the early days, Rob Zombie rose to prominence with the band White Zombie, and everybody knows White Zombie. You've heard a handful of songs on the radio from that band, whether you even knew it or not. Thunder Kiss 65, Dragula. Rob was a household name by the time the 2000s came around. And that's when he got financing to make his first movie, House of a Thousand Corpses, which sat on a shelf over a year after it had been filmed and edited and put together and ready to release because Universal said, we can't release this. In comes Lionsgate, they released the movie. It's a pretty big hit for its budget and for being a guy's first movie. After the success of House of a Thousand Corpses, Lionsgate was like, Rob, let's do another one. So they come back with The Devil's Rejects, and that's when Rob really put himself on the map as a filmmaker. The Devil's Rejects made a decent amount of money, it was definitely profitable for the studio, and it got much better reviews than House of a Thousand Corpses. People seemed to really start to take notice of this Rob Zombie guy, which landed him the gig for Halloween. Now, we've talked about this ad nauseum on my channel, so I'm not really going to relitigate any of that. But truth be told, Rob Zombie's Halloween made a ton of money. It was a huge movie. It owned the Labor Day opening weekend record for over a decade, and it shot Michael Myers back to prominence. And this is when Rob Zombie really became a hot commodity. After Halloween's success, Rob Zombie would do many interviews talking about many film projects he had in the works, whether it was Broad Street Bullies about the Philadelphia Flyers, whether it was a movie called Tyrannosaurus Rex about a boxer, or his name being attached to stuff when he didn't even know it, like a remake of The Blob. Rob Zombie had really become what a lot of people were hoping was going to be the next influential horror filmmaker. Now, unfortunately for Rob, he got roped back into doing Halloween 2. He didn't want to do it. It was something that the Weinsteins almost kind of made him do. See, it's not that Rob didn't want to continue that story in any way. No, it was more so that Rob felt like his passion laid elsewhere. He wanted to do new projects. He didn't want to be stuck as a guy doing Halloween movies. Because, look, let's be honest, throughout history, when you get typecast as something, whether that's an actor or a filmmaker, you almost can't get out of that. So I respect Rob for not wanting that to be him. But he came back for Halloween 2, which I adore. It's my favorite Rob Zombie movie. And it was a modest success, but it made about half of what Halloween 2007 did, and that's when people started to sour on Rob Zombie a bit. Later that same year, Rob Zombie would come out with an animated film called The Haunted World of El Superbeasto, which a ton of people didn't watch, and those who did watch it didn't really care for it. Look, it wasn't really Rob Zombie's thing. He was getting a little more experimental at the time, and while I appreciated that, I didn't like the movie myself. I watched it one time. I don't own it. I really kind of don't consider it part of Rob Zombie's filmography, but it technically is, so I've got to add this in there. Now, famously, after that time, Rob Zombie was trying to get Tyrannosaurus Rex off the ground, potentially Broad Street Bullies off the ground. There was still talk about that Blob remake, so there was a 3-year lull between projects for Rob Zombie, and a lot of that was because Rob really wanted to do something different. But alas, none of those things came to fruition, and Blumhouse got involved with Rob on an idea for a movie called The Lords of Salem. They gave him a small budget for that one, and he went and shot it in less than a month, and then it ended up getting a very limited theatrical release in the United States. Now, Lords of Salem was not a big hit at all. It pretty much just made its budget back. It was a low-risk, high-reward situation for Jason Blum. It ended up paying off in that he didn't lose any money, and Rob Zombie got to do an idea for a film that he had been wanting to do for a really long time. Now, The Lords of Salem is a really interesting movie because, like, aesthetically speaking, I think it's Rob's biggest movie. I think this movie looks the best, and I really do think that Lords of Salem is Rob Zombie's most ambitious project. But the ending doesn't really cohere all that well, and all of the goodwill that movie had built up for me up to the third act really kind of falls apart. But I still think that Lords of Salem is actually a really good movie, and I think it was very important to Rob's career, and it speaks a lot to the kind of filmmaker he really can be when he is given free rein. Now, there was years of silence after that. And then in 2016, Rob Zombie came back with 31. Now, 31 was a movie that he had to crowdfund. Now, he didn't have to, but going to these studios became a problem for Rob because, yes, a lot of studios wanted to work with Rob, but they did not want to give him the budget that he was requesting for some of these movies. Look, if you watch a Rob Zombie movie, one thing you'll notice is he really likes to do it up with the gore, with the violence. And he also has a flair for that 70s aesthetic. So that's expensive to do. It's expensive to capture that and make it period and accurate, but it's also more expensive to do practical gore effects to make them look good and to really do it up. So a lot of these studios were like, hey Rob, we'll work with you, but we're not willing to give you X amount of money. Well, 31 would come out and it was a total flop. Didn't make its budget back, it got really bad reviews, and things were starting to look bleak for Zombie. He would come back with 3 from Hell, the much anticipated sequel to The Devil's Rejects. I say that in air quotes because The Devil's Rejects did not need a sequel, but certain fans really wanted to see one, and this was another one that he self-funded, and you can tell. Look, 3 from Hell, it's not the same at all. It's a totally unnecessary movie, and it just didn't make any money. Nobody cared. Again, this movie didn't even make its budget back. It got bad reviews, and things were really bad for Zombie. He would then come out with The Munsters in 2022, which is a project that he'd been working on with Universal for years. He had been fighting to make a Munsters movie because he's famously a huge fan of the Munsters ever since he was a kid. And he came out with his first PG movie. And look, The Munsters is the only Rob Zombie movie I've seen one time, not including El Super Bisto. And I thought it was fine for what it was, but it's not something I'm ever going to find myself going back to visit. It really came and went. Nobody really talked about it. It didn't make waves. People talked for about a week because it was Rob's newest movie, and then it was gone. That was it. The Munsters happened, and nobody talked about it up to that point. So it's been 3 years since Rob Zombie has released anything. And about a year ago, he did an interview with Howie Mandel, and he spoke as to why that is and what his future looks like in filmmaking. Look, if you followed Rob Zombie's career at all, you know that he likes to focus on one thing at a time. He really does not like to do a new album or a new tour while also working on a movie. He's done it before, and he's been miserable doing it. So in this interview, Rob specifically said that he was focusing on music right now, putting together a new album, a tour. That was his focus. But it was a little bit different, because Rob even kind of opened up about how he'd been kind of burnt out on filmmaking at the time. Now, he didn't explicitly say that it was because everybody had hated his recent movies, but that definitely has to play a role in it. And let's be honest, as a Rob Zombie fan, I can honestly tell you guys, the last 2 movies he's come out with have just not really done anything for me. And even I, as a Rob Zombie fan, was like, okay, what are we doing here, Rob? So I definitely think that's played a role. Now, it is true that Rob Zombie has been very busy touring, and he is working on new music. It's been rumored that a new album was going to come out this year at some point. So Rob's focusing on that right now. But he also said that he was going to wait for a good idea to come to him. He was no longer at the stage where he was taking ideas to studios to try to get financing. Not at this point of his career. No, if a good idea comes to him or a good script comes to him and he feels compelled to want to direct that, then he'll do it. But that's where he's at in his career. Now look, Rob Zombie's now in his 60s, so he's probably going to slow down a little bit, of course. Also, he probably feels spurned with his most recent offerings, that people just didn't really care about them and they didn't make a lot of money. So I understand why he's kind of jaded at this point. However, I personally don't see this being the end of Rob Zombie. Because throughout his career, Rob Zombie has shown us one thing, and that is he does not care whether you like something or not. He makes these movies for himself. A Rob Zombie movie is very much a Rob Zombie movie. You hear people talk about that like it's a subgenre. And that is because Rob Zombie's movies have a very specific look, a very specific style, a very specific tone. Now, for some people, that's not their cup of tea. They hate Rob Zombie's aesthetic. They hate Rob Zombie's storytelling. They hate Rob Zombie's worlds, his characters. They hate all of it. That's not what this video is about. I've got to say, it felt like with The Munsters, Rob lost a lot of that. Because it was PG, because he had constraints with Universal and it was a well-established IP, I feel like Rob felt like he could only do so much, and it just didn't really feel like a Rob Zombie movie. I love that he made it for him because it was a passion project for him, but I just don't really think it's what he should have been doing, ever, honestly. That's just not Rob Zombie to me. So I do believe that Rob Zombie will direct again. I don't think this is the end of the guy's career. For some of you, I know you're probably disappointed to hear that, but I'm a big fan, so I don't want to see this be the end. But here's my thing with Rob Zombie. What's next for him? Where do we go from here? Look, Rob has been in this weird state the last decade where it's like, let me revisit ideas that I had years ago or things that have been festering for a while. Look at 3 from Hell, look at 31, look at The Munsters. To, at best, mixed results. I just don't feel like that's Rob Zombie's bag. When he's feeling pressured to do things for a studio or for the fan base, I don't think that's Rob Zombie. That doesn't come across as authentic to me. If Rob Zombie's going to come back and make a movie, I want to see Broad Street Bullies. I want to see Tyrannosaurus Rex. I want to see a Blob remake. I would love to see that because those are things that Rob was passionate about, that he really wanted to get off the ground and it never happened. Also, I did throw my hat in the ring and say I'd love to see a third Halloween movie. Of course I would. Is it ever going to happen? No, but I'd love to see that too. See, at this point in his career, I don't want to see Rob Zombie sacrifice any ounce of himself to please a studio or the fan base. I want to see him do stuff that he wants to do. And I want to see it be very much Rob Zombie. Look, we saw about a couple weeks ago that Neon and Paramount and all these other players are trying to get involved in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I know that this is something that has been bandied about for years, to the point where it's just like, well, yeah, it's so obvious. But I'd love to see Rob Zombie do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. Now, sure, House of a Thousand Corpses was basically his Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, but if that movie showed you anything, it showed you that he could do a bang-up job with a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. There are a lot of things this guy could do that I would really, really be interested in seeing. But what I'm not interested in seeing is Rob Zombie doing things for other people. And even more so, Rob Zombie not doing any films at all. There was a time where I thought that Rob Zombie was going to be on that Mount Rushmore in my generation for horror filmmakers. Now, personally, I can say that I probably would put him up there in my lifetime. Not all time, guys. Relax. But objectively speaking, could I say he belongs there at this point? No. Sure, I love House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects and Halloween 2, and I really like Halloween. And I really like The Lords of Salem. But his recent offerings have not been great, and the guy has pretty much been mute on anything to do with film over the last couple years and doesn't really seem to have that fire anymore. So honestly, what was once a promising career of a guy that I thought could go well into his 70s making banger horror movies seems very much in question right now. But having said all of that, I do believe he'll be back. I do believe he'll be back, and I think it'll be in a big way. I think he'll make something that's really going to ruffle feathers. I think he'll do something that he truly feels like is going to have something to say. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to mean something to him. That's what I want. I want Rob making movies from his heart. And I know a lot of you guys hate this guy's oeuvre. You don't like him as a filmmaker, and you specifically don't like his style. But his style is something that I love, because Rob Zombie is nothing but a shock artist. That's what he does in his music, in his movies. Why? Because that is the kind of stuff that Rob grew up with. That stuff affected him. That is stuff that he wanted to put into his movies. You see these vile characters and you're like, this is not real. But for some people, it is. Some people grow up in those kind of environments, around those kind of people. Rob Zombie did. Rob wants to shock you. He wants to offend you. That is the point. If he's not your type of filmmaker, well then yeah, you don't care. You're not going to watch it anyway. You don't like the guy, that's fine. So I don't really know what the immediate future for Rob Zombie looks like. It's probably focusing on his music for this year. But my plea is to Rob Zombie, next year, get underway with a project. Let's see a movie again. I want to see something new. I want to see something fresh. I don't want you revisiting old stuff that you did years ago. I don't want you sacrificing yourself for a studio. No. Do something you want to do. Make it offensive, make it vile, make it gnarly. Most importantly, make it Rob Zombie. And I have all the faith in the world that Rob Zombie will be back to piss many people off for years to come. But I want to hear down below in the comment section what you guys think. What do you think the future is for Rob Zombie? Do you want there to be one? Are you missing him? Are you like sayonara sucker? Whatever it is, comment down below and let me know. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like on it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. This is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I'm pulling out.